The Chord Electronics 2Qute DAC has been on the market for about 2 years now. It's received many industry awards and lots of industry praise. As a product, it made sense within the Chord Electronics DAC range, but as time has moved on, does it still make sense today?
Oh, Britannia, Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never will be slaves.
Hello and welcome to Pursuit of Perfect Systems' full review of the Chord Electronics 2Qute standalone DAC. The Chord Electronics 2Qute standalone DAC has made sense as a product in the market. It's allowed audiophiles access to Chord's FPGA DAC technology at the lowest price point. Its main rival has been from within Chord in the shape of the Hugo. Now the Hugo at a higher price point offered audiophiles more features, a headphone amplifier, portability, more connections, self-powered via internal batteries, but ultimately used the same FPGA DAC chip as the 2Qute. Customers had a tough choice of which DAC to go for. However, now with the launch of the Hugo 2, Chord Electronics have really upped the ante at that end of their product range. So how does the 2Qute fare now? Right, let's talk about the design of the 2Qute DAC, and I think when they named this DAC, they absolutely nailed it. You know, calling it 2Qute is just about spot on. It is very small, but still, you know, very well made. You know, nice piece of hi-fi equipment, really. But it actually feels odd calling it hi-fi equipment as it is kind of so small, and you can kind of fit it in your hand and probably weighs best part of a kilo or something. So that's unusual for hi-fi, you know, to have something like that. But having something a bit odd and unique is certainly not unusual of Chord obviously to do that. In terms of just the aesthetic appeal of the DAC, it's not a lot not to like, really. Something that I think is outstanding with the whole Chord DAC range is the kind of glass or perspex that you can see through. Now that is an iconic thing, and that's bound to go down in my eyes in hi-fi history for something individual and specific to Chord Electronics. And what I found quite interesting is, you know, hi-fi of old, hi-fi of years ago, there was a phase of kind of clear perspex or clear tops and clear lids to equipment, and I haven't seen that in years. You know, you see that in an older kit, and in old pictures of kit and stuff. Now all of a sudden we're starting to see kit come back for sale with kind of clear lids, for them. So you start to wonder, are companies seeing the success of these Chord DACs, seeing the the fact you can see into them through that little kind of glass circle there, thinking that that's a really nice touch, and then kind of copying it. So this is potentially an iconic design. Well, this is an iconic design, and potentially one that's being copied now throughout the industry, and there is no better form of flattery than copying. So that is a lovely touch. That is a lovely touch across the whole DAC range for Chord Electronics. And actually, the way the writing's kind of milled, or it must be milled into the top piece of aluminium, it is really nice. The rest of the DAC feels really well made, nice connections, and there's not really a lot to talk about when something's this small, but it's a really nice looking, well made DAC. You wouldn't be wrong to feel in the sense, well, where's my money? Where's my money gone? Obviously for this, because we're so used to kind of big and bulky boxes. But sometimes if you look at the internal pictures of those big and bulky boxes, there's nothing in there. They're just empty space. So what is the point in taking up a load of rack space when you can do the job with something this small? So I applaud Chord for taking this leap and taking the leap of faith with this design. It's obviously paid off for them really well, and this is a lovely looking, really well made standalone DAC. Okay, the specification of this DAC, well, the big one is the fact that it uses a Spartan 6 FPGA DAC chip, which has a WTA design, and it uses 26,368 tap length filters. Now, a lot of you out there will be the same as me that doesn't fully understand the full technical implications of those names and those numbers. However, the relevance is when you compare this to the other DAC chips within the Chord Electronics range. Okay, the 2Qute has 3 inputs. It has SPDIF or BNC, optical or USB. Interestingly, the USB input has galvanic isolation, which from personal experience of building an audio PC is a very nice touch. Now the USB input and the coaxial or BNC input supports 32-bit 384 kilobytes, also DSD up to 128. The DAC is driverless for Mac users and also for the optical and SPDIF inputs. Now for Windows users you will need drivers to use the USB input, but you can download those for free from the Chord website. Livability of this DAC, well, it's probably one of the easiest products you can live with, in a sense. You plug it in, you don't even need to turn it on, you plug it in, it automatically comes on, and then you leave it. It's as simple as that. Changing the settings, of which there's only a handful, is really quick and really easy. The fact that you get an LED kind of glow here, which through the different colours for the different options and stuff for the settings and for the file playback is a nice touch. Some of those colours are easier to make out obviously than the others, but at least you know where you are. It's a simple control system and it's very easy to know where you are. For example, red LED means coaxial input. Very important to mention is the output from this DAC is single-ended RCA phonos only. The THD on this DAC is shockingly low at 0.0003%. Okay, let's talk about the sound quality of this DAC. Now, if you've never heard an FPGA DAC, I suggest you go and listen to one as soon as possible, because as a technology, as a DAC technology, it makes sense. It just completely makes sense. Every time I've heard an FPGA DAC, straight away the sound presentation, it just makes sense. Now, the first thing you notice with that type of DAC technology is the clarity, and by clarity I mean the kind of the start and stop of the notes, or the start and stop of every element in the music just seems clearer and more precise, and because of that the overall presentation seems to take on a much clearer and cleaner presentation. And once you've heard that style of DAC, it just makes sense as a technology that it works, and it works really well. Now the actual sound from the 2Qute DAC has a lot of positives, and looking at the positives of this DAC, and the first word and the first thing that springs to mind is space. The space you get from this DAC is really impressive, and if you listen to a lot of classical music, or if you listen to opera or classical, with opera, then I think this DAC will really impress you, because having that space and having a sound stage that's got space is really appealing for that style of music. Another positive trait of this, or another positive of the sound of this DAC, is the mid-range clarity. Now, when mid-range takes on its own space within the sound stage, not always in the center, is it? But when it's got its own space and its own clarity and its own edge, with silence around it, with blackness around it, that's a really impressive thing and a really nice thing to listen to. And that is a sign of a quality system, or quality components within the system to produce that. The bass quality and the bass control from this DAC is also really impressive. I'm a bit of a bass head, and not in terms of amount of bass, although I feel that is important, but bass quality. For me, when bass is good, it's one of the first things you notice, and when bass is bad, it's one of the first things you notice. And I'm very pleased to say the bass quality and the bass control from this DAC is very good. Another point to mention is the soundstage clarity with this DAC. Now, when music is designed to have a spacious sound like classical, brilliant. However, some music is designed the opposite. It's designed to be intense, isn't it? Designed to be kind of wall-to-wall sound. And with this DAC, the clarity within that presentation and the layering and the detail within music like that was very impressive and easy to track, easy to listen to, and non-fatiguing. Transparency. Transparency with this DAC was good. Resolution and detail from this DAC also very good. Overall, as a DAC, you know, it ticks a lot of boxes. It is a very satisfactory and enjoyable listen. Now, content depending. One thing you'll notice with this DAC is that the higher the samples or the higher the file quality, or basically your high resolution music content, the better the presentation by quite considerably. And when I mean the better the presentation, I mean it's a more filled out presentation. It's a more more rounded and more colourful presentation. And I did find that with this DAC, it punished some Redbook CD content a little bit. Another thing that I noticed with this DAC, and with obviously the musical Fidelity new Vista 800 integrated amplifier, which I'm using to review the Chord DAC range, is, you know, this DAC's got a very low noise floor, and, you know, as per the spec, and, you know, a lot of clarity. And I found that the system needed turning up and turning up and turning up to kind of bring it to life. And it just made me think, if you're the kind of person that listens at very low volumes, you probably find yourself turning your system up more, because it's so clean and clear and precise. You can get away with turning it up much more. Okay, just a couple of points with this DAC. Now, these are not really negatives, bearing in mind that, you know, the price point and where this DAC sits in the market. But for me personally, the DAC had great bass control and great bass quality. But for me, it was a little lean. I would have preferred a bit more bass quantity from the sound, from the presentation of this DAC. Another negative is actually also kind of a positive. This DAC takes music very seriously. Now, that can be a positive for certain type of content. Now, I mentioned this bass and the effects on kind of classical music, definitely. And when a DAC takes music very seriously, for music of that style, that is a massive positive. However, sometimes when it takes music this seriously, again, it can punish content a little bit. Some Redbook, CD content, I found it punished it a little bit. And one other negative for me was just kind of musical involvement. I felt the presentation from this DAC, as good as it is, and it is very good, I just felt it kind of, the presentation was holding me off, kind of keeping me at bay, as opposed to kind of inviting me in, kind of giving me a cuddle. And that's a really hard way to describe it. But again, they're just a few points. Now, I'm talking, critically as DACs in general, not necessarily at this price point. And at this price point, this DAC has got some, really strong sound characteristics that are really very good. And for a lot of people, I can imagine this DAC being the kind of star of their system, because it's so clean, clear and precise. That kind of presentation will be, instantly enjoyable, instantly likeable. Maybe at times people want a little bit of anarchy from their musical presentation, but I think most of the time people are serious about their music, and they want their music presented correctly. They want it presented cleanly and clearly and uncoloured, and that is what you get, obviously, from this DAC. Okay, the conclusion for the 2Qute Chord Electronics 2Qute DAC. Now, it's actually been a little bit of a difficult product to review. Not in the sense of using it. It's been a doddle and a real easy product to use. Just in the sense of categorising this DAC, because it does some things very well. I found myself being very critical of this DAC. It kind of performs at a point where it's so close. It's very close to being very good. And you find yourself being, I found myself being very critical of it because it is so close. It is a really strong performer. So we started this review with two main questions. And the first question was, now Chord have upped the ante at this end of their product range with the Hugo 2. Has this DAC been relegated to an entry-level DAC, or is it still, a strong performer? And it's an interesting one because, technically this is Chord's entry-level DAC, but it doesn't perform at all like an entry-level DAC. Obviously, it's not priced like one either, but it really doesn't. And the areas where it's good, it's very good. And some of the strengths of this DAC, and I think this DAC technology range, are really compelling. When you consider the overall package, it's specified really well. It'll play, a massive variety of music files. You know, you've got, you know, flexibility with connections, USB or SPDIF. You know, it's a very small, easy to place DAC for people. So, you know, you can put this away in a drawer, you could put this away in a furniture cabinet, you could put it on a hi-fi rack, you can put it on top of another speaker, as I had to, obviously, for this review. So, you know, there's a lot going on within this very small package. After, you know, spending some time with this DAC, this is far from an entry-level product. This does perform very well. Now, looking at the second main question, I think the question really with more relevance. Now, called up the ante, does this DAC still make sense? Now, previously the Chord 2Qute was priced, you know, a reasonable amount more than this, but, you know, obviously offered more features. However, with the 2Qute, that's now priced significantly more than the 2Qute, and actually that makes the 2Qute make more sense because the gap has been increased. So, yeah, previously the gap between the 2Qute and the 2Qute wasn't massive in terms of price point, with the 2Qute being around the £1,000 mark. Now the 2Qute is around the £1,800 mark. So the price difference between the entry level FPGA DAC and the next DAC up is significant, and you know, you would have to determine and decide for yourself whether you felt, you know, that the extra was worth paying. But I feel for a lot of people with certain levels of systems, this DAC is going to give them a hell of a lot of what they're looking for. You know, a clean, controlled, organised, precise sound with a spacious soundstage from a very small, relatively inexpensive package that is also well equipped. Overall, you know, it's a very good, you know, compelling listen. So to give this a rating, I think for the price, I think for the package, I think for the specification that you get for this, for the price point, you know, and what you get with this little package, it's very easily, you know, a double thumbs up. This is, you know, it's a good performing DAC, and a good performing DAC in general, let alone a good performing DAC at the price point. Now, would I buy this DAC with my own money? That's an interesting one. I personally, if it was for my own system with what I'm running now, I would actually be looking a bit further up the DAC range. I must be honest, I'd be looking for a bit more performance in the certain key areas, as I mentioned obviously earlier in the review. However, maybe a less specified system, and I don't mean that derogatory towards anybody, you know, just trying to speak honestly, then I would definitely consider this DAC, and I would definitely consider buying it because it is very good. You do get a lot for your money. You don't get a lot for your money, but you do get a lot for your money. You know, you do get a lot of sound quality for your money from a small package.